What's up, everyone? Today I'm going to introduce you to InDesign and get you acquainted with some of the basics of this program so you can get started using it. For context, I am using InDesign CC 2020, the most recent release, and I am using this on a Mac. So if you're looking for subtle differences like the little dots up in the corner on the left-hand side, if you're on a Windows, obviously you're not going to see that. There's just a few little things. For the most part, anytime you see a difference between a Mac and a PC version, I will do my best to point it out. All right? So let's get started. When you open up InDesign, you'll get either this screen here, the home, which mine will look a little different than yours if you've never opened this before, because I have the documents I've recently had open, as well as there's the Learn tab. And take advantage of this because there's a lot of great tutorials that Adobe puts out that you can kind of learn a ton of little things. And if you look, they're all 3 minutes, so they don't take a ton of time, and they're nice little quick refreshers to get you acquainted with some stuff. Definitely check these out if you can. All right, so what I'm going to do here is anytime I'm on this screen, I can do a few things. I can hit Create New. I can open a file that I already have. I could also, if I wanted to make a new file, go to File, New, and in this case, it might be a little confusing at first. There's Document, Book, and Library. You're always going to start with Document. Book, even if you're making a book, it's a little misleading. You're still going to start with Document. Book is something a little different in this context that we'll get to in a more advanced lesson. So again, you can go New, Document, or you see right there the quick key for it. You can hold down Command and hit the letter N. These will all do the same thing. They will all bring up this screen here. All right, now when you hit New, you're going to get this box that pops up. We have some recents that I've used in the past. If there's document sizes you tend to use often for a particular job or a type of project, you can save them. Then we have some standard print or web or mobile sizes. You don't have to use any of these. You can just go right into this box here, and you could directly type in the sizes you want. If I do want to use something pretty common, say I wanted to use a print document, I wanted to do letter size paper, which is 8.5 by 11 inches. If I go here, I don't see 8.5 by 11 because this unit is not in inches. Now, we could change this unit, but it's important that if you're going to be working in a program like this, you don't just rely on the inches. It's really important to get familiar with this right here, and this is called picas. Now, picas are a unit that we use to measure type, and it's a kind of confusing unit at first for a lot of people, but it's really not bad. So here's how picas work. There's picas, and then there's a subunit of picas called points. Very similar to how we have in America, we have inches and feet, right? So points are the smaller one. Points are like inches. Picas are like feet. It all depends on what you're measuring. So this 51P0, and that's how you would say it, 51P0, means 51 picas, 0 points. For the math to break it down, there are, we have 6 picas to an inch, okay? So 6 picas in an inch, and there's 12 points in a pica. So points are very small. So just like inches to a foot, there's 12 inches in a foot, there's 12 points in a pica, right? There's 6 picas in an inch. So if you think about what you're used to going through some normal day-to-day stuff, if you're using Microsoft Word or anything like that, and it comes up as 12 point, that 12 point font is 1 pica high. So that gives you kind of some perspective on how big a pica really is. And if I do the math, if there's 6 picas in an inch, 66 picas is 11 inches. So this is my 11. And you could probably figure out if you did the math, 51 picas is 8.5 inches. Okay. So we have an 8.5 by 11 here. Next thing we could choose is orientation. Portrait or landscape, right? So if I do that, it just swaps those sizes. Just make sure it's just kind of indicating which one you have bigger. We could set a page number here. I'm going to just do, say, 4 right now as a practice. And now we have facing pages. Facing pages is a representation of whether or not something is a book or it's kind of linear. If you think about when you open up a book or a magazine, the 2 pages are side by side. They're facing each other. If you do not have that, they become stacked. So imagine just a series of, say, posters you could scroll down or individual slides on a PowerPoint. So that's the difference here. If you're working with something that's meant to be printed and opened, it's facing pages. If you're working with, say, 4 or 5 poster designs or business card designs or something like that, you don't want this checked. Start number means you can change what number you start your page numbering at. That seems like a strange thing. Why would you not start at page number 1? Sometimes you're working on, say, a newspaper or a magazine. You're working on a particular section, and you want to start yours at, say, oh, my section starts at page 24. So you start your page numbering at 24 so it adds up. Primary text frame is primarily for when people are doing book design and they're filling it with large content of text. Basically what this does is the same thing that Microsoft Word would do. When you get to the bottom of a page and you filled it with type, it'll automatically create a new page. That's kind of the main function. If you're doing a poster and you run out of space, you don't want to create a second poster for that last like word or two or couple of sentences. So usually, unless you're doing book layout, we don't keep this on. So I would keep that off most of the time. The next thing is columns. So these are guides that appear. So you can come up with different column layouts, and we'll kind of go through these. You don't have to set this here. Any of this information you can actually change after the fact. I'm just trying to get this as close as I can. And if you look down here, there's a preview button. So if I check this preview button, it's going to give me this document in the background, and that'll help us see a little bit of what this is actually changing. So before we get to it, you can see our pages. These are our facing pages, and if I uncheck that, now they're linear. Okay, facing pages, linear pages. Okay, next thing, if I change those columns, if I change to 2 columns, you'll see now there's 2 columns in my page. And again, these lines aren't going to print, but they're there for me to work with in my layout. And then you see column gutter. A gutter is the space between 2 areas. So this is my column gutter right in here, this little area. So if I do 2, 3, whatever it happens to be. So I'll do a 3 column. That's pretty common for magazine and newspaper layout. Next thing down is margins. Now, margins are a safe area that you can print inside of that aren't going to get cut off or kind of be too close to an edge or too close to the inside of something where you can't see. Oftentimes, you'll get a really thick book, especially school textbooks, I find do this a lot. And if the book's 100 or something pages and you have it open, if you look up here, that little space in between, when you get to the middle of the book, you can't quite open the pages all enough and you'll lose some text in there. All right, so that's something you want to be careful of. That's what we have, is those are part of our margins. If you notice, it's not like a lot of documents you've probably used in the past. It's top, bottom, and not left and right, but inside and outside. Right, and the inside and outside is because, again, when you're holding something print-wise, if I'm holding these pages up here, I have my inside is kind of near the margin or near the spine, and the outside would be the outer pages. So left and right wouldn't really work because the left of each page would be the inside of one and the outside of the other. Now you could change these all together. If I go up, it adds a point each, and they all change. Or if I don't want them all to be the same, sometimes I want my outside margin to be a little bigger, for example. I can unbreak this link, or break this link rather, and I can increase my outside margins, right? And that'll help me change that. Now you're not going to see a big change on here, but when we start a document, you'll kind of see what that does. We can mess with that in a little bit, though. So I'm going to set that back to 3P0. All right, next option, bleed and slug. Now, slug is not going to be overly important. Slug is something that we put on the outside of a document to contain information for the printer or from the printer. And that's something that if you were dealing with a print press, they would tell you what your slug should be so that they can include that. We're not going to worry about that at the moment. We're going to talk about the bleed. So bleed is a really important concept, and I'm just going to start to up my arrow, and you'll see this red line appear on the outside. And what this is anytime we have a photo or a full colored page, and we want it to go all the way to the edge, we actually have to go a little bit more than all the way to the edge. And the reason for that is when printing happens, they're going to print this on a bigger piece of paper, and they're going to cut it down. And if your color or your background image comes right to this border, what's going to happen is sometimes when they cut, the cut will be off a little. It'll be too far in, it'll be too far out, and you might end up losing something, which is why we have the margin to protect it. Or you might end up with like this white trim or white edge around, which isn't going to look very professional. So we do a bleed. So if I had a black background on this page, for example, the black would come all the way to this red line, even though that's not supposed to print. If the knife is a little off when they cut, it's okay because that whole area is black. So there's this little kind of margin for mistake. All right. So bleeds are pretty important. The standard bleed is going to be about 1/8 of an inch or 0.125 inches. In this particular case, we're dealing with points and picas. That's going to be 0P9 is going to be the most common. So that's 9 points. And that's going to be probably the bleed you see the most often, or at least it's been the bleed that I've seen the most often. Okay. All right. We're going to go ahead and hit create. And that gets us this document. So we're right in it. If I scroll down, and I'm just using my mouse to scroll right now, you can see I have my page 1, my page 2, my page 3, and my page 4, right? And they're aligned in this way. If you think about this as a book, if you look up in your pages palette, which should be on the side. If it's not, if you see this properties palette, you can click on pages. This is the cover of the book. Then you open that cover and it opens to the left. This is the inside of the cover. This is the second page, or the third page technically. And then if you close that cover, this is the back cover. Okay. So let's just talk about where things are for a second so that we can get used to areas if I tell you to look in a particular spot. So this is your toolbar. If you've never used an Adobe program before, the majority of the core kind of Adobe creative programs are similar to this. We have this toolbar here. Anytime you see this little triangle facing down and to the right, it means there's more tools buried beneath. So if I go to this T, this is my type tool. And if I hold it down, there's another type tool underneath, right? Because of that triangle. If I do that here, nothing happens, okay? Now, if you hover over any of these, they'll give you direct selection tool, so that's the name of the tool, and then the letter in parentheses, A, is my quick key. So if I wanted to get to that on my keyboard, if I hit the letter A, and you can see it pop up in the bottom, it switches me to that tool. If I hit the letter T, it switches me to that tool. And it's a good habit to get in, to just kind of start using these. I use these a lot when I'm kind of navigating and jumping around. Super useful. All right, we have our type menu up here. So we have file, edit, layout, type, object, table, view, window, and help. So if I say, okay, we're going to go up to type, I mean, come up here, and that'll be options that have to do with type or layout. And this will be options that have to do with layout. For example, if I go to file and I see document setup and I click on this, it'll bring me back to the majority of that information we just set. The margins, the bleed, the page size, how many pages, things like that. So if you need to change anything, you messed anything up when we were doing the setup, you can always go file, document setup, brings you back to it. Up here, you're going to see tabs. If we open up multiple files, that'll have the names of each of the files. And in this case, we have Untitled 3 is our name, and we haven't saved it yet. That's why we see that. On the right-hand side, we have our palettes. Now, if I go to Essentials and reset Essentials, yours might have opened like this, okay? Now, this is kind of the standard default layout for 2020. And again, what I just hit as Essentials, these are workspaces. These are preset spaces that determine what palettes are going to be open, but you don't have to use any of these. Anytime you see another tab here, we have pages, or we have libraries, or we have properties. These are our working palettes. Now, any palette that you don't see here that you want to get, if you come up to Window, this is a full list of all of the available palettes. So if I said, oh, I was doing something in my Pages palette and you didn't see Pages, you could come in here, scroll down, and find Pages, and click it, and that's going to pull Pages up. Now, that one's already there. Let's try one that's not there already. I'm going to go with, we'll do swatches. So swatches is underneath color, and then I go swatches, and now that palette appears, okay? Once the palette's here, I can usually click this little space to pop it out. I have these doubled arrows to expand the palette so it's permanently out, or I could grab the palette and drag it away, keep it docked out here. I don't like to do this. This is kind of messy for my taste. Or I could hit this X and close that palette. And if I need to get it back, again, Window, and it's there. But again, I would just get used to, as you kind of become comfortable with the program, you'll know what you use a lot, what you don't use a lot, and you start to sort of build this up into a workspace you like. Now, once you get it to a spot that you like, if you want to kind of keep it that way, you can come in here and you could choose New Workspace and save it as your personal workspace. So it'll always have the things you want out, okay? If you are using an older version of InDesign, it would probably look like this, the Essentials Classic, which is this properties bar up here instead of on the side. And this is sort of the old way of doing it. This was, I think, up until 2019's version. This is kind of how it looked. We are going to work with, again, this kind of layout, because anybody who's downloading CC right now is going to have 2020 as of today. All right. So I'm going to just keep my properties, handy, because this is one that I'm going to use a lot. And you can see even our margins. I can change my margins right in here. My width and height I can change in here. My page numbers. And then we're going to talk about some of these things in a few minutes. Everything's really, really easily accessible from here for that document setup, but that's because I don't have anything selected. As I start making things and selecting things, you'll see this starts to change. One thing I don't have here is my columns. Okay? So where I can change my columns, if you've changed your mind, you don't like what this is that's based on layout. So layout, margins and columns, and there you go. Now I can change my margins. And just like before, I can make them all the same or unlinked, and I can change my columns, 3 columns, 4 columns, 5 columns, etc. The big difference of doing it here, I'll hit OK and go to my pages. If I change it here, when I changed it in the beginning, it made those columns for every page. If I'm on page 1 right now and I change my my columns to 2, it changes it. But if I go to the next couple pages, it didn't change it for every page. So that's the reason you would want to set it up, you say in the beginning, is because it'll do it for every page. Or as you do it later, it'll do it for just the one page that you're on, or whatever page you selected. All right, let's just talk about some basic navigation right now. If I want to get to a page, I have to double click it in the page palette, or I can scroll to it. When you're dealing with a document that's 100 pages, you're not going to want to scroll. Get in the habit of not using these as well. I know a lot of students really seem to like using scroll bars for one reason or another. If you don't have a mouse with a scroll wheel or scroll sensor or a trackpad, the way I would suggest navigating around is by holding your space bar. If you hold your space bar, your cursor turns into a hand. And now I can click and drag, and I can navigate around this way. I don't have to go find my scroll wheel. And I know some people are going to say, oh, but this is how I always do it, so this is what I'm comfortable with. I don't want to do that. That's new. Get in the habit of this. It makes things much easier. If I want to jump right to a page, I can double click on it, and that'll bring me to that page. If I just click once, so now you see the 4 in my number 4 is highlighted, but the page of my number 2 is highlighted. And that means that this is the page I'm on, and this is just a page that I'm selecting if I wanted to do something with it. Now, the way I can also tell that I'm on that page is if you look down in the bottom left, you'll see a number 4, right? That's what page I'm on. So anytime you're not sure which page you're actually on, you can always look down in that bottom left, and that'll tell you what page number you're on. You could also use this to jump to a page. You can click that and say 4, or click that and say 3. Now, the selection thing is nice because sometimes I can select 2 pages. So I'm going to hold Shift, and I'm going to select 2 and 3 at the same time. Or I could say 2, 3, and 4 at the same time. And now if I do something like margins and columns, because I have all 3 of those selected, they're all going to do whatever I changed it to, right? Cool. Next thing, it's important to know about Adobe programs, and this is true for all of the Adobe programs, as well as probably most programs that you've used in sort of day-to-day life, is the quick key for zooming in and zooming out. If I hold down the Command key and I hit plus, and I know that says equals, but the equals and the plus sign are the same, or minus, that'll zoom me out, right? So, zoom in, Command plus, zoom out, Command minus. Now, if you were on a PC, it's Control, not Command. That's the only difference. So you're going to hold Control and Control plus, Control minus. You can also do Command 0, and that brings whatever page I'm on to the full screen kind of level. So Command 0 brings that up 100%. I'm sorry, not 100%, full screen. Command 1 makes this 100%. So that's about actual size. If I were to hold a piece of paper up to my screen and the resolution I'm using, that should be about 8.5 by 11. So again, Command plus, Command minus, Command 0, Command 1. Those are our zoom ratios. There's other ways to zoom. I wouldn't use them. I would use this. It's nice, it's quick, it's efficient, and it's true for this program, for Photoshop, for Illustrator, for the majority on your browser. If you do this on Safari or Chrome, it's going to zoom in or zoom out, right? All right. So that's the basic interface to InDesign and how you get around it. Now we're going to move on to learning some of the tools.